Conspiracy. Many Americans still use that word when talking about the assassination of President Kennedy 55 years ago this past Thursday. And while we're talking conspiracy, what about the moon? Did we really land there? There are plenty who think not. So why, after all these years, do all these conspiracy theories persist? Our cover story is reported by Susan Spencer.
Spy novelist Gail Lynds has made an entire career out of conspiracies.
How many conspiracies do you think you've dreamed up in your lifetime?
Oh, a couple hundred.
Look at all the conspiracies we have just right here.
Her office at home near Portland, Maine, is a breeding ground for conspiracies.
The CIA is overflowing, as you can see.
Its shelves filled to bursting with evil secrets and nefarious plots.
Military technology, special ops, war tactics, strategy. Wow. Do you have any trouble coming up with these things?
No, I don't. I actually...
Some people might say, what's wrong with you?
Her espionage novels have sold millions of copies. And they all start with one unbreakable rule.
Hope you enjoy.
Yes.
The conspiracy has to be believable. That's not hard.
In fact, there are and have been genuine conspiracies.
I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow.
There's Watergate. There's Iran-Contra.
They're wonderful to write about.
And read and talk about. We look for conspiracies everywhere. According to a recent CBS News poll, more than half of Americans still believe there was an official cover-up connected to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Roughly 1 in 3 say the government is hiding the truth about 9/11, and 1 in 10 thinks the moon landings were faked.
So if you want to know how important conspiracy theories are to people, just bring up a few next time you have Thanksgiving dinner with your family. Do it after a few bottles of wine, and after the arguing is over, you probably won't be invited back the next year. 25% continue to think that 9/11 was a hoax.
Joseph Uzinski is a professor of political science at the University of Miami.
Conspiracy theories are ultimately about power. There's never a conspiracy theory about, the homeless guy with no arms and no legs conspiring against us.
So how does a conspiracy theory start?
A lot of times what happens is people will just come up with some of these ideas on their own. For example, one of my favorites is that the CIA created lesbianism.
Uzinski gathered roughly 100,000 New York Times letters to the editor, 120 years' worth, dealing with various conspiracy theories.
And what we find is that beliefs aren't really going up. But what we can say is that they're playing a much bigger role in our political discourse.
Sometimes with potentially tragic results. After he became the subject of conspiracy theories, billionaire George Soros was targeted by a pipe bomber. And critics of the president worry that his views often include the conspiratorial.
Do you think somebody's funding America? Do you think everybody's bad?
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. No, I wouldn't. I don't know who, but I wouldn't be surprised. A lot of people say yes.
What does your basic conspiracy theorist look like?
If I ask people to close their eyes and imagine who that person is, most of them are going to think of a white, male, middle-aged, look a lot like me.
Tinfoil hat?
Perhaps, living in the mother's basement with a ham radio, but conspiracy thinking cuts across race, gender, political party.
This vast right-wing conspiracy that has been conspiring against my husband since the day he announced for president.
Almost everybody believes some kind of conspiracy theory at some point.
Psychologist Rob Brotherton says human beings are skeptical of coincidence and think in terms of cause and effect.
One of the main jobs that our brain has is to spot patterns in the world, to spot things where A seems to be connected to B.
And when something big happens, like a terrorist attack or a mass shooting, we assume there must be an equally big explanation for it.
Like the JFK assassination, a lone gunman assassinating the president, changing the course of history, that's a very small explanation for such a big event.
We want a much more complicated explanation than there is.
Like a vast conspiracy involving hundreds or thousands of people ongoing throughout time.
We have suffered a loss
especially since some experts believe a JFK conspiracy is not out of the question.
There's kind of good reason to be suspicious of the Warren Commission report, because it was kind of rushed, and it didn't cover everything. It did leave some things out.
More than half of all Americans think there was a cover-up of the Kennedy assassination.
I'm inclined to think that there might have been.
The mafia killed JFK.
I'm not sure it was the mafia. Maybe it was the Cubans. Maybe it was the Soviet Union.
Such theories persist no matter how improbable.
A lot of these depend on huge numbers of people keeping a secret.
So workplace romances fall apart fairly quickly, and that's two people with low stakes. If we're talking hundreds or even thousands of people with very high stakes information, I mean, it's been decades and decades and decades, but no one's come forward to say, I was the other shooter.
And if you don't buy the JFK theories, what about this guy? Is he alive? In this one.
You've seen those little crawly things, haven't you? Oh, we're big crawly things.
Poor Paul McCartney has been rumored to be dead since people played Beatles records backwards in the late 60s. What is your all-time favorite conspiracy theory?
So the interdimensional lizards, I think
Pardon?
that's a good one.
what?
Interdimensional lizards?
I'm not familiar with this one.
Yeah, so all the rich families, the monarchy, all the presidents, they're all related to these trans-dimensional shape-shifting lizards.
I'm looking at your eyes just to see. You might be one of them.
By now, you too may be looking nervously over your shoulder.
So how's the average person supposed to distinguish any of this?
Well, the best thing to do is to listen to independent experts.
You know that's not gonna, nobody's gonna do that. You know, we could start some sort of rumor that you were actually a spy.
I was never a spy.
Well, you would say that.
Conspiracy thinking is a spectrum. Some of it is ludicrous and some is quite reasonable. Governments do keep things from us.
And perhaps for that very reason, Professor Uszynski thinks a little dose of conspiracy thinking actually may be good for democracy.
Conspiracy theorists have for decades pushed for the release of more documents relating to the JFK assassination. That's a good thing. Conspiracy theorists pushed for the 9/11 Commission. That was a good thing. A world without conspiracy theories might be a very dangerous one, because at that point, no one's able to question power structures.